Okay, so I'm Grant Cooper from Team Quantum, and joined here with James as well.
You're listening to the RoboCast.
Hello everyone, my name is Samuel64 and welcome to the RoboCast. As always, I'm joined alongside Steve the AmericanKilljoy and World of Woodrow, and as you would have heard in the intro, we are joined this week by Grant and James Cooper from Team RoboChallenge and Quantum. Gents, how are you both? Are you feeling good? How was going to BattleBots for the first time in 3 years? It must have been a bit of a strange experience going back after quite a gap out.
Definitely, it's something that Grant and I are very passionate about, our projects, and I think we're incredibly focused. So if we're choosing to do something, we go in, we jump in with both feet. And it was great to reveal the first Quantum back in 2019. It seems crazy that it was that far ago. But then after that, it's a bit like preparing for an Olympics, and then the Olympics get cancelled, and it's such a mental game, this fighting robot stuff. And then we had last year again with COVID, maybe we can go. It's all sort of got chopped again. So this year we were like, okay, we need to get mentally back in the right game. We didn't want to come back with the same Quantum because it's like a personal thing for us, in that we don't want to go to turn up. We like it to be a bit of an engineering challenge for ourselves, and we're trying to push the boat on how do we make a crusher relevant. And I think that was the biggest question for me personally is, are we outdated now? We haven't been for 3 and a bit years. Are we coming back just to get slaughtered? And actually, are we not really relevant to the sport anymore? That was my personal feelings. So this was a bit of a, let's dip our feet in the water, see how we get on, and that might answer a few questions.
Yeah, well, when we decided to sign up for this year, we sort of had 2 choices. Do we do a full redesign from scratch with all the new ideas that we've had over the last few years and come with something on our absolute A game for this? Or do we come with some critical upgrades for reliability and just general all-round improvements of the machine, and sort of dip our toes in and see what the changes of all the other teams have made? It's great watching these episodes on TV from the past few series we've not been in, but until you actually get there and see the energy and the advancements all these teams have made, it's very difficult to sort of counteract that. So in the end, we decided, like James said, to do the best job we could with improving the version that we've got. So a lot of the internals are very similar in terms of how they work and things like that. And then we'll hold off for the really big upgrades until we've sort of been through this season and learned a bit more.
Absolutely. Going back as well, you kind of mentioned with, you've made subtle improvements to the robot from season 4, would it have been now?
It was, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It seems like a long time ago, doesn't it?
World Championship 4.
As it's now coined, I suppose. What are the kind of main changes that have been made to Quantum? Like, is it just like...
Aside from the color change.
Yeah.
Well, it was blue before, wasn't it? I thought.
No, it wasn't blue on the back, was it?
Yeah, it was.
It was.
Oh, Steve.
Yeah. Bite Sauce
wasn't...
Blue from Home Depot.
Been done in.
So there was a few things that... There's a few things with Quantum that work really well. The drive system works awesome. Really pleased with how the armor works on the rear end in particular. The hydraulics, but there were a few things that could really do with optimizing. So the first one was the heads. Although it looks visually very similar to the previous one, it's actually 0.6 of a kilo lighter, and it's actually a lot beefier where we need that strength. So we've really optimized the head. There's quite a lot of design work went into that, and that's a lot more of a combination of generative design and sculpture now. So we bring a lot more of the sculpting element into it to give it the aesthetic that we want, but more to take those vertical impacts. As the verts are really scary machines now, and we need this head to be able to It's our only chance to try and take them on is to use that head as a way of stopping weapons. So we did quite a bit of optimization on the head to improve the strength, but make it lighter, which is pretty awesome. And I think from an aesthetic, it was something where you go, I'd like to just make it look a little bit more sinister. I'd like to bring a little bit, just tease more character that maybe a lot of people won't even notice, but you'll just get the vibe that Quantum's a little bit more evil this year, perhaps. And the second big one was the self-writer. I'll let Grant talk about that.
Yeah, so the self-writer you'll have seen from previous series, and very similar to how we made it for Spectre and King of Bots, was a sheet titanium self-writer. And that was great for weight. It was extremely light, and it did the job most of the time.
Just about.
Our motto has always been the same reason we have very thin titanium armor or around the back, that if we don't drive well enough, we get flipped over or we get hit around the back. Well, that's our own fault. So the self-writer has always been an area we've tried to save the maximum amount of weight. But now there's so many vertical spinners in the game, it just takes the slightest mistake and you're hitting on your back. And so we really needed to look at beefing that up, because although we can self-write with the titanium version, once you do it 3 or 4 times, it starts to flex a bit too much and it makes it very difficult. And what we found, certainly at the last King of Bots, we've got this set of armor we can see on the screen, which is for anything with a low ground clearance. We use this front end for, and it's a very low, very lightweight front end. For horizontal spinners, we have a very wide, very heavy front end, and that just tips the balance to self-writing perfect every time, to where you just need the head in the right position to self-write quickly. And
we
so
actually lost to Apollo because of that, didn't we, Grant?
Yes, we did. Yeah,
not Apollo, sorry.
Yeah, whatever he calls his Chinese version.
Vulcan, yeah.
Vulcan, yes. So that was one of my favourite fights, actually. Mm-hmm. But again, we got flipped 3 or 4 times, and on the last time, it was just that bit too flexible to get over, and the weight balance was different. So we got onto designing a full generative design aluminium version that's a lot stiffer, and also brings that generative design and sort of skeletal-like structure to the outside of the machine.
It's very like Witch Doctor ribcage style at the back, right? It's kind of like, very much kind of... It adds to the kind of, this is a creature that's
skeletal
kind of,
effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think if you take the armor off the robot, it looks a lot more like a body now. And the armor is definitely a cloaking that you add to the machine. It's difficult to tell from the picture here.
We're almost opposite to Witch Doctor, aren't we?
So.
Yeah.
We design in a very different way to a lot of teams, where a lot of teams, like Witch Doctor is a classic example, build the internals as a very... If you take all that sort of fancy ribcage off, it looks
box, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And they've done that because it's very quick and easy to repair. If you're designing just to win the competition, there's no doubt that is the best way to design. If you need multiple spares you're building, you haven't got tens of thousands of dollars budget to have all these parts made. And that's really... They've optimized that design. And then they make it look nice with all this external stuff, which looks great. We sort of go about it the other way around, and we start from the inside with all the generative design and everything else, so that one obviously from a performance point of view, it's a huge performance game for us in terms of the power to weight ratio of the machine with the generative design, but also we really wanted to make it have this story behind it. It is an animal. Quantum's its own thing. You see, it's when it grows and bites another opponent, tries to ram it around the arena. We want the robot to have the character, and so we start that from within first, and that plays a big role when we come to adding the armor. And so you'll see on there, we try and add the absolute minimal amount of armor so that you can see all that sort of skeletal structure. And I sort of compare it to Chomp in some ways, where you take the covers off Chomp and it looks incredible, but you see all the things on Reddit and the forum saying, "Oh, Chomp just looks terrible." It's because they've had to. It's because they've had to just put this armor on so it stands up against the spinners. And we've taken probably a bad choice from a performance point of view to try and sort of sacrifice some of that armor to try and keep the character and everything in the machine. But
Try and expose who Quantum is in the insides, I think.
Yeah.
One thing that was a bit of a shock for us was one big difference from 2019 to now was we turned up at BattleBots. We were getting prepared, and then the production team come round and say, they start making notes on the paper. Okay, how many Quantums have you got? You're like, what do you mean? Like, this is Quantum. There is only one Quantum. There will only ever be one Quantum. And so, but
it's a different
that
world,
shows
right?
the nature of the sport.
Yeah.
It's evolving. These machines are so ridiculously powerful now that it makes sense to have 3 Quantums in a crate that you go, okay, that one's buggered. Let's get another one out that's fresh, that's good to go, because then you perform. But there's something about, so somebody asked us about how many heads do you have? You're like, well, one really. It's kind of nice at the end of the competition to see those scars in its head and go, okay, that came from that fight and that came from this fight.
100%.
As Grant says, maybe we made the wrong decision and the head will
Well, I
get
don't know.
straight off.
I mean, I kind of don't mind that outset where a lot of bots now are kind of seen as disposable. Where there's a lot of just like, oh, throw the next part in. It's very assembly line like, where it's like,
it's a lot more like motorsport now, which is great, because you get there and you feel like, okay, this is the competition. There's nowhere else in the world that can afford to do this. King of Bots probably, but there's nowhere else that you see this level of engineering on this scale with enough budget for people to be on their A game every fight. It's not like olden day Robot Wars, where if you fight Carbide, you get torn in half and you go into your next fight and you're a little bit limping and you're trying to do. It's a very different challenge, and it's not better or worse, but you do get the pinnacle because of that. But we're not at that level.
Maybe if we had, we're a completely self-funded team. We don't have any cash sponsorship, unfortunately. It'd be lovely to get a big cash sponsor and help, but we don't. And also, we're very sort of stuck under time constraints. But we do all of our own machining and things to be able to do this in a more affordable level for us. But maybe if we did have $100,000 spare and infinite time, maybe we would turn up with 2 or 3 Quantums to make our life easier.
Would it spoil Quantum though if you knew there was another one?
Would it feel less special for you guys? If you obviously, as you said, you could, okay, not easily, but you could turn up with 3 Quantums, and like if one gets destroyed, you throw it away and start again. But like, would that make it less special for you guys? Do you feel? Because obviously, Quantum is we'll get on to obviously the other fights, of the episode later on as well. But it's so unique, and like you look at the field now, it kind of, there are so many high energy vertical spinners, horizontal spinners, whatever else you like, and Quantum is now currently, as things stand, the only hydraulic crusher. Would it make it less special if you kind of turned up with 3 robots which you can throw away if you need to? Like, was that kind of in your mind as well?
It definitely does. Absolutely. It's from our point of view, it's a difference between a one-off piece of artwork and someone who's photocopied and sells a signed version of them. Those signed versions are never as popular or worth as much as the original handmade piece. And that's Quantum for us is as much an art piece and a form of to show what we can do and what we're capable of, more so than it is a dedicated fighting robot machine, I'd say. We don't necessarily design a robot just to out and out win. We'd build a very different machine if we did that. So this is what James and I like, is what we really enjoy doing. And we put all of our effort into making something that, when that's in our office after, is something we can look at and show clients and be proud of, and people come around and say, what, that's really cool. And that's where we get the pride of and the enjoyment from fighting in places like BattleBots. But at the end of the day,
the only thing I would say is that if we were going there to get destroyed, that wouldn't taste very good. I think that would be. We need to do something about this, and either change the robot or accept that maybe it's not the right sport for us anymore, or whatever. It's such a all-consuming sport. We put so many hours into this thing. We don't see our families for quite some time because we're developing this, and it requires that dedication. Otherwise, you turn up and you're not there with your best. You're not showing what you're capable of. So it's really important that we don't turn up with the old Quantum.
Well, this was a big part of the reason why we didn't just go full bore with all the upgrades we wanted to do right now. And we said, look, let's sort of make the critical upgrades we want to make, the reliability improvements, the performance improvements we want to make, and then scope out the field and see where things are before we burn ourselves out again and then think, oh, well, we've kind of gone in the wrong direction with this.
So that's the thing. You're changing too many variables. Then you don't know if when you go back and try to redesign it after you've gone and fought, what was the thing that brought you down the most, or what helped you the most. That happens with some teams too, where they try to, especially like the big change from brush to brushless. That's a huge change for some teams. Or
well, you saw that with Tombstone. Very clearly. There's one thing going with a proven machine and making small incremental improvements, and then there's another doing a full redesign. And it's those teams that are out there, like Witch Doctor and others at the moment, who every series, I mean, I know they look the same, but they're making lots of small improvements. It's that keep going and making small improvements that are making these machines so good. And hopefully things like the live show will help that even more. So we are wary of changing too much at once, but at the same time, the big differences for us since we came in 2019 is they've had a whole new arena floor. We've not fought on this new thicker floor. And that's changed the ground game significantly. And
that was a big missed opportunity for us, though, wasn't it, Grex? Prior to 2020, we were probably the only team in the world that was surface grinding the fronts. So we had polished front ends, and that's why we performed so well at King of Bots. Was nobody else was doing the attention to detail that we would, and that was the same at BattleBots. Nobody was polishing front ends, so they were micron accurate. But then when we were missing for 2 years, all of a sudden you come back and everyone's
done that.
And you're like, oh, that was our opportunity to be ahead of the field when they got a new floor, and people then realized, oh, actually the ground game's critical. We lost that opportunity to steal a march on the opponents. So
that was something that really worked well for us at King of Bots, because they had a very thick, super flat floor. Obviously, BattleBots, that floor doesn't last 5 minutes before something like Ripperoni's gouged some holes in it.
The arena floor was not the same after that fight.
No.
I will say there was always a scuff in the arena from, I think that was filmed day one.
Day one, there's definitely spots in the arena that if you track them throughout the days, because the first 3 filmings are going to be the first 3 sessions. So if you pay attention as you track through fights, you can kind of like sort of put the schedule together and it's like, oh wait, I remember that then. That wasn't there before. Or wait, no, that was from that fight. Yeah, well.
and to be fair, BattleBots do a great job of repatching up the floor each night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they did.
Give it 2 or 3 fights.
We even got to experience that a little bit and watch. That's a hardworking crew. That is a thankless job.
Absolutely. But no, it was great for us to go there and just see the changes. And if we'd have turned up with the front ends we were looking to change, it wouldn't have been the right move this time, because that floor isn't as flat as we thought it was, and that it does get damaged fight to fight. We need to have a good rethink going forward on how we go about the next redesign. So I am glad we didn't do the full rebuild and redesign from scratch, but everything you see in that image on there in the new Quantum is brand new. All the armor's changed subtly, but it has changed, and not just from a visual performance. From a visual perspective, it's all there to save weight, to make space for new things, change bits around, and just generally improve the machine. So I know a lot of people might not see the difference, but it is significant on the outside at least.
One thing I have to ask about, and I think we've had a bunch of listener questions about, we obviously put out that we're interviewing you guys this week. A lot of people asked about the hair.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
there is no hair.
The quill.
The proto feathers, I think, is how it was described. Right? I mean, where did the inspiration come from? How many beers did you had before thinking, let's put that on the robot? Why not? You know,
it's one of those things that will be Marmite Some people won't like it. I think Grant didn't like it to begin with as well. And you know what? Maybe they're right or wrong, and we'll see how Quantum evolves.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right?
It adds to the animalistic quality, which I guess isn't helping the whole argument with animal cruelty and robot combat, but we'll just get past that. Everything's fine.
So there's quite a bit of change. Like there's the structural changes to the head. So it's actually got a narrower snout. It's a lot chunkier on the snouts now. But you'll see sort of halfway down the nose, there's like ridges in the nose there. It's trying to just add these like little anomalies that you would see in like a bone structure of a prehistoric creature. They've got like all ridges over the top, and there's no real explanation as to why they're there, what they're for. But it's just like a natural evolution of the machine. And there's quills in there as well to sort of finish the prehistoric-y sort of mysterious nature of what is quantum, where did it come from? Somebody asked, well, what's the skull based off? And it's not based off anything. It's its own creature. Yeah. And we don't know how it's going to evolve over time. It was close to having quills coming in and out, all the self-righter down the rib cage, but Grant put a stop to that. we just don't know. We always have, one day somebody will come into Grant will come into the office and go, oh, we need to do this. And it just clicks and you go, yeah, that's the right direction. And it's very rare that we ever come up to something and go, we sort of, it's separate ways. For some reason, it just seems to work. Grant will have an idea for something, or I'll have an idea for something, and we go, yeah, let's go for it. And the quills were something that were not obviously they don't bring real performance to the machine. Allegedly, it's to give it that little bit more of a sinister look, to go, you need to take this machine more seriously. It's not an art bot. People call it an art bot, but the purpose of it is to go, hold on, actually, it may not be a spinner, but you need to be worried about it. And that would be, if that happens, then that's a huge personal achievement, I think, for me.
There's a lot of that, and sort of trying to add features and things to it. But what we see Quantum as, Quantum is its own beast, it's its own sort of creature as such. And you'll notice James and I on TV, we're not the loudest people. We don't dress up, we don't shout about things, because that's not our character. We want the robot to do the talking. As soon as you see it, we want you to sort of just see it instantly and understand what this robot's about. And so these features like the quills and other bits like that are just little features to just add character to the machine, we hope at least, so that when you see it, you just instantly get it. You see that this is a creature of sorts. It's not got a weird bone-like head and a Lamborghini type back end that's a weird mash of stuff. It's hopefully blends together as sort of one nice creature, and you can instantly sort of tell what it is.
You don't have to worry about that. It does.
It stands out, yeah, definitely, for sure.
Yeah, so that's the aim, and obviously the quills for us, the Quantum, although it's effectively like a dead version. So a lot of people ask what the difference between Quantum and Spectre are. And Spectre, you'll see, has the eyes. It doesn't have the holes and things going straight through. That's more of like the living version of Quantum. Quantum's like the dead, fully skeletal version with the holes through, no eyes, and all that side of things. But at the same time, a bit like a zombie, it's kind of half alive as such. And so adding those quills made sense to us. When James told me to start with about them, I said, well, Quantum's not dead. It's a bone-like thing. You don't have quills on there. But yeah, the more you sort of visualize it, the more you think, actually, yeah, it's sort of almost like a zombie, like it's dead, but with some living features as such in it.
None of us were on the archaeological dig that found it, so it's fine. No one knows. If it just came out like that, it's fine.
We actually
I dug it out of the billet.
We actually want to do a spoof where I want to get Quantum's head and get it into a museum with its own plaque. I'm going to try and do that this year.
If there's any museums out there willing to make it happen, please get in touch. We'll make it happen somehow.
I mean, the British, I think it was the
Natural History Museum sort of thing. That would, but the Science Museum had a load of like Doctor Who props over a couple of summers ago, so I'm sure they would. They're up for putting TV stuff in there just for.
the fact
quills
they've got it.
obviously so they're designed to give the machine a little bit more character, a bit more of a sinister look. But you would also find quills in a fossil or something like that. So
Right.
it's yeah.
It's a discovery only sort of somewhat recently that they thought, oh, dinosaurs have these quills or feathers or something like that. So yeah, it makes sense in the evolution of what we know of prehistoric archaeology as well as what we know of this machine.
Yeah. Who knows what it'll look like next year? Like,
Yeah, extremely feathery next year.
yeah.
Afro.
We'll just
I was going to say
Mohawk or something. Yeah.
we'll dip it in honey and then just put a pillowcase over the top of it.
Amazing. Final question about the robot before we get on to the fights is it's a two-part question. The first part of the question is from Charlie Hubbard, who asks, if there is no sprite on site to refuel Quantum, would Sierra Mist suffice, or must it be Sprite? And the second
is a acceptable substitute, but you can't guarantee
same level
containing the
of
pressure.
performance.
You might hear a knock. You know, you just gotta be careful.
And the other part of the question is, will there now be a sponsorship deal with Sprite after the How to Build Quantum video?
We are absolutely open to cash sponsor. You'd be our first cash sponsor, but yeah, we wouldn't turn it down.
Well, is it big enough that you'd have to share it with BattleBots?
Yeah.
I guess that line of questioning is open.
And one thing regarding sponsors, it's sort of we don't want to come across as a big commercial team. This is like a personal project for Grant and I, and so we quite like not having a great big list of sponsors. The sponsors that are on our page, obviously, is RoboChallenge because that's our company, and then you've got effectively friends of ours. We've got Goering, who have been a partner of ours for a long time now, who supply us with machine tools. We've got Autodesk, who again have been a long partner of ours, supplying us with software. And ETG, we've been in partnership for our machine, the 4-axis machines. So it's nice that those are people that haven't given us cash to come on to BattleBots. They're more ways of, it was an opportunity to say thank you to our partners who have been with us for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very much, this is what Grant and I are capable of with whatever money we had in our pockets at the time and whatever time we had available.
Yeah,
I guess at the end of the day, it's your machine. You know, it's not a machine funded by so many other companies. I guess, you know, it really is yours. And at the end,
I don't think I'd want a Red Bull sticker on the side of it. $100,000. In one way, it'd be nice to put that in your pocket, but at the same time, it does change the dynamic of who Quantum is if it has sponsor logos on there. You'll see a tiny little emblem of RoboChallenge logo on there, and it's
right there.
It's really purposefully done to be really minimal and just add attention to detail. So everywhere on the machine, we're looking at detail. So you can't really see the wheel grills there. Nobody's mentioned them, but they're like a new addition for this year. There's lots of things where you go pick out like a segment of the robot and go, how do we add detail to here that either brings performance, or how do we make it more interesting as well?
You were saying, Grant.
I was saying one of the big things for us when it comes to sponsorship, obviously, it'd be great to have $100,000 sponsor come in and do as much as we like to this machine. But on the other hand, there's a very key point that we constantly talk to with Autodesk, particularly about how we build our machines. As you'll probably see on Reddit and other things, people look at this machine and say, that looks great, but you must have done that on a 5-axis machine, had a load of money and all this sort of stuff to do it. And what we're trying to show is that you don't need all this money. You don't need super fancy software. You don't need a really fancy machine shop. All you need is a tarmac and a good mindset to sit down in Fusion and design something like this. And others have done it in the featherweight scale, made some really nice recreations of this type of machine. But you don't need to be a heavily sponsored, really wealthy team to be able to create something like this. And I think that's really important to show that you can think outside the box. You can create all this interesting type of stuff without money, without fancy machines. You can make Quantum on a tarmac. It would just take a lot longer than it takes us.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get back to some more questions about Quantum in a little bit, but should we talk about some fights from this week? What do you think?
Yeah.
So, kicking things off, it's shockingly, it isn't Sawblaze for the
I
first
know,
time
right?
in
It's a
3
different green and
years.
black robot or blue, purple.
We start off with Ribbot and Witch Doctor. Can we call it a fight? Because
First
it was
it was.
We can with the
stomping.
first few hits. I've seen the Witch Doctor team are doing a new series of like Pits Access of showing what goes before the fights, what comes after the fights, even a little bit of during. They've got a camera inside one of the hats, which is very cool. So they went behind the scenes and talked about what happened before the fight and after it, and some of the damage that was done to Witch Doctor when they went weapon to weapon. Ribbot did a lot more than you saw, basically. So it ripped out a load of the bolts from the front wedges. It had sheared off some of the weapon mounting on the side, that sort of bony structure or the bony triangle type shape underneath the ears, the horn, self-righty things. But yeah, it had taken a few chunks out of the weapon as well, which is impressive.
Yes, we can call it a fight.
Can indeed call it a fight.
Oh yeah.
I think it's easy to underestimate the energy that's going on in these machines, especially when you see it battle after battle. The spinners in particular, they're so vicious. And it's not until you see fighting robots in the flesh that you really... And even then, once you've seen a few battles, you don't really understand the energy involved. So when you've got 2 big spinners going at it, the consequence of taking the first hit is so drastic that, it's pretty incredible that they actually keep going.
So that first big pop where you see Ribbot kind of fly through the air and it's up and over, then it hits its own weapon into the floor and it's kind of out of control at that point. It's just, incredible like how quickly the fight kind of escalated for them, really.
I mean, I definitely think Witch Doctor learnt a lot from fighting Bite Force and watching Bite Force matches, because their driving style and tactics have changed to kind of match what Paul was doing back in the day, in which you'd hit an opponent over, chase them down and hit them again when they're like upside down. And there's one delicious hit that Witch Doctor goes straight in afterwards and absolutely smacks Ribbot across the arena. And I remember thinking when we saw it live, whoa, that's a hit. And then seeing it back, it was the same reaction again, because it's phenomenal. I know Ribbot's weapon choice, I think they'd have probably gone vert config here anyway, but they had some technical issues with the undercutter. This was another thing revealed in the Witch Doctor video. Go and watch it, it's great. But yeah, so they couldn't run the undercutter. They focused a lot on the vert.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and that you have to be on your opponent in this game. It's no longer, and you'll see it later in later fights, the way people are driving now, because of the ground game, because of the consequence of taking that first hit. You're going to see the sport and the way people are driving is going to change. You'll see it in this season. I think we're going to really see it in the next season. And as you say, once you've hit them once, you don't kind of hang back now. You have to be on them, because you give them half a chance, that's it, it's game over.
It's even at the end of this fight where Ribbot is down and out of it in the corner and they're being counted out, but Witch Doctor's there, spun up, ready to go in again, just in case it even
breathes,
dares twitch. That they're there ready, and they're going to make sure it's done with, basically.
And this is interesting too, because you're talking about a ground game and a team that won that does not have a ground game. They just have a weapon and armor out the front. They don't even run forks. They just have an incredible driver and an incredible drive to just tear everybody apart that they can. And yes, that second hit is delicious. And I do remember seeing that live and thinking, wow, this is a really special beast. I think we always knew that with Witch Doctor. I mean that there's no mistake there. But oh man, is Ribbot licking their wounds after a wonderful season last year. There's one point in this fight where the new frog top, where with the eyes, they're 3D printed, and there's one point where it pops out and it's like hanging, and I'm like, that's very visceral.
Why was it like underneath
for
it,
a
like
team
red or
that
something,
says,
you know?
Yeah, for a team that says "Save the frogs" on top, it's not a good look.
Yeah,
Those
this frog needed saving.
I think they were dishing those any damaged frog eyes out to people in like the in the high five zone. We got to sit there, and somebody was telling us that they'd got a Ribbot eye, and I was like, oh, that's so cool, because previously they'd just been part of the mold, and now they've gone for something a little bit more interesting and gruesome, which is fun.
Yeah. The rim on wheel deal with Ribbot. Do we think in future? I don't know about. I mean, future fights. I mean, they don't have anything other than these wheels. But do you think maybe in future seasons do they evolve and think maybe this is a dying breed of mobility, and maybe go to something that's more solid, something that can take a hit, because they come off pretty easily with a direct hit if you're not right on top of your driving game.
Yeah, I reckon tracks.
Okay.
I think it's always a conscious decision on how you do your wheels and where you put them and the materials you use. If we had exposed wheels like Ribbot does, to be honest, I'd probably make them very weak. So that if you get one torn off, you're not having all that cost and expense and time of redoing everything through the internals that's become damaged with them. Yeah. If you can protect them slightly better and you're very confident about driving, then I'd go with something different. But having them
solid rubber, that energy goes into your axle.
I know
that's solid. It goes into your chassis. It goes into your gearboxes. So how I was talking to somebody the other day on. You need to think about the impacts that you're going to take, and you've got to think about how do you want your machine to fail? How do you make it fail in a way that's good for you, for either immediately in the fight, or how do you make it so it's good for you after the fight so you can prepare for the next one? I think exposed wheels like Tombstone has, they're so easily replaceable. It's the first thing that's going to get hit. If you're going to have something torn off, let it be a wheel and your robot's still intact, and you live to fight another day. And it's a toss up.
Yeah, especially now the rules have changed as well. Now
I was going to say,
now that you don't need to get out of a certain size square, as long as you're moving, you're still in the game. I think that makes these sort of sacrificial wheels probably a bit better now than they used to be.
Yeah. Just gotta drive better.
Ribbot and Hypershock, I think, are two robots that do 4 wheels with some that can be removed, and the robot still goes quite well. Because we see wheels come off of these two robots more than most, I would say, and they still manage to keep it going, and that's just testament to what you've just said, basically.
Absolutely.
But I think one thing that Witch Doctor have done really well, and as you say, you spoke about their driving and taking a leaf out of Paul Ventimiglia's books from Bite Force. Is that you'll notice that Witch Doctor, particularly Bite Force, really aren't very quick machines. They're a lot slower than the majority of the field, but with that you get an awful lot of extra control, and that's one thing we've tested back and forward with Quantum in different competitions is the speed of the machine, and we've actually toned it down from what it was for one of the King of Bots series, because we just find you go too quick, you just lose that fine control. You can put 20 kilowatt of brushless motors in. You can have it doing 30, 40 mile an hour, but when you need to be accurate and you need to be on your opponent all the time, it doesn't help you that much unless you've got magnets in pulling you down. And even then, the accuracy is still not as good as it is if you slow down to 12, 15, 16 mile an hour. And I think Bite Force was between like 9 and 12 mile an hour, something like that. It was very
modest.
Slow. But it won on control. And I think
some wheelchairs that would go that fast at a high speed, So
Absolutely.
If you think back to every champion of any competition, they all had one thing in common, and it was a good drive. None of them were necessarily the hardest hitters, the biggest flippers, anything like that. It was always drive that was the thing.
Absolutely. And driving, the practice, obviously, that Mike Lately's been driving this robot now, specifically this robot for 7 years, and experience goes way back,
so
forever.
Long.
Yeah, it's crazy. Brilliant stuff, Witch Doctor. Ribbot, obviously, we'll have to kind of reassess.
It's not a bad loss.
No, it's not. You know,
Considering,
if you listen to Witch
the
Doctor who came
quality.
second
Last
last
year,
year,
second place,
and
yeah.
second in the Golden Bolt as well, you know,
Right,
it's kind
so-
of, you know, what's a loss to that, right?
If you're going to lose one, that's the one, you know, you can say, okay.
Exactly.
I mean, you look at the fight schedules for everyone. There's one that should beat you, one you should beat, and then two that are reasonably on your level. That's the setup for this season, give or take. Unless you're like one of the big hitters, in which case you get an awful lineup and good luck to you. But this, I think, is Ribbot's. Yeah, this is Ribbot's one that, in theory, should beat them.
Yeah, it's their bogey team, if you like.
Yeah.
Yep. And Ribbot's next fight will be up against Claw Viper by the schedule, and then you have Witch Doctor's next fight against Fusion. So those are both spicy matchups for match number 2.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of match number 2, we come to Quantum versus Captain Shrederator. Now, where do I begin?
This was vintage.
Yeah.
I was going to
guys.
say,
This is like Spectre King of Bots level of showing them the arena.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this was one of those fights where, as we said, we'd been off fit for 3.5 years. One thing that's critical with this is the drive, and Grant and I, our communication during the battles and our strategy, and worrying about being rusty, and that was always playing on their mind a little bit.
And we've not been in a fight at all with any robots since BattleBots and King of Bots 2019.
Yeah,
the robots have been on display in the office and not touched. We've not fought with the featherweight or anything since, and so we were quite nervous that we were going to be not great at driving at this one.
But like a fish to water, it seemed like you were doing just fine.
It's one of those things where with Quantum, it's a really weird type of machine in that you always feel so close to losing the fight. Like if we allowed Shrederator to spin at once, taking an impact from that at a good speed would be catastrophic. Quantum's a predator; it doesn't do armor. We don't take hits. That's not what we're about. So you always find that it was the same with Spectre. We either really dominate the fight or it gets really bad. so moving into this fight, we've been really close to fighting Captain Shrederator before. They had a technical issue and weren't able to make it, which was a shame. So we just didn't know what was going to happen here. Another thing that we were a bit concerned about was I had a bit of like a real lull after our blacksmith fight, which was the first unveiling of Quantum, and it got stuck in the top of it. It's the first time anybody had punctured AR material, and it happened to us, and we were stuck, and it was a real deflation of all this hard work, and that's what we have to show for it. And I think we're a little bit suspect that there may be some AR plate underneath those plastic panels. And the last thing we wanted to do, especially against Shrederator, was get stuck on them and start opening up the rule book of, hold on a minute, you did it to Blacksmith, now you're doing it to Shrederator. Yeah. So we said, let's not bite through them. Like normally we would go with a single tooth for AR plates. We went, let's not risk it. Let's just go with double teeth. Let's just grip hold of them and just try and control the match. But a couple of bites in, you start to feel, this feels like you can kind of hear Quantum whirring, you hear the sounds of it. Like, this isn't loading up at all, actually. This feels a little bit spongy under here. You kind of just lean on the stick a bit more and it keeps going. Hold on a minute.
It's just like,
there's nothing under here.
Straight in.
Lean on the stick's full belt.
Honestly, watching the fight, like it was just like the first few, I think you kind of hit the rails on the ring of the spinner, and then as soon as you hit that kind of soft plastic on the top, and it was gruesome. There's like the way it went, it just disappeared. There was no resistance at all. It was glorious. Like watching this fight was just. I mean, I want to say, Grant, you were driving, weren't you?
Yes.
Spectacular. Unbelievably good.
Just wall to wall to wall to wall. It's great.
What we don't really understand, we've made minor tweaks on the drive, but it's more, there's nothing extraordinary we've changed. we expected it to be very similar to last time. And at King of Bots, we were always able to show that power and that speed and control. For some reason, last time at BattleBots, I don't know whether it was the floor was so
I think it probably was.
so warped, whether it was us or what was going on, but we never really had that really good solid grip. We seemed to slide a lot more. Even when we grabbed people, we never seemed to be able to just slam them around. And this was good because it sort of gave us that confidence back that actually, the robot's doing what we want it to do. It's driving as we want it to do, and it's got the grip and the power we want it. And this first fight was a massive confidence boost for us to say that, we're not necessarily perfect with our driving or anything else yet, but that the robot was doing what it needed to do. And that then gives you the confidence to go forward and say, you know what, now we can plan our strategies properly. Now we can work on what we want to do.
Speaking of strategy, what are your thoughts on the new wart in the arena that is there? Because that wasn't there the last time you were here. The shelf. Is there any way that you guys were thinking that maybe you could use that to your advantage and add that to your? Hey, it's there.
It's one of those things where people always go, "Oh, you should to try and level the playing field. You should put things in the arena but everything that you put in the arena helps a vertical spinner. There isn't like you can put bollards in the arena, you can put shells in the arena. They all help vertical spinners more than anything else. So our ethos was if we're on the shelf and there's a vert at full speed, let's just stay on there. What's the point of coming up?
Live the fight another day.
but to be honest, I mean, for us, we'll do the best we can in any scenario. And for our machine, drive is so critical that the bigger and more open the arena, the better it is for us. However, it also does open some opportunities for us, like trying to get Shred in between the smaller gaps on there. So if it did get up to speed, we've got the advantage that hopefully it can't run away. It'll hit the wall and stop itself. So that does play on our mind. And certainly that was part of the strategy going into the fight. But as always, as soon as you're actually in the fight, you just forget about the shelf altogether. You don't even realize it's there other than just trying to avoid it and not run yourself into it. So I wouldn't say it played a big role or any role really. When
I would say probably the kill source are more of a thing to think about when you're driving than the shelf.
Yeah. Well, the kill source for us, obviously we do try and avoid them. Our chains are relatively exposed underneath, except for some small titanium plates. So we'll usually try and avoid them. But what we do constantly keep in our mind is if we ever come up with anyone with forks, we'll be driving all around those holes as much as we can. So, and again, that's all plans and things you come up with before the fight. When you actually get to the fight, a lot of that just goes out the window. You just locked onto your opponent.
Frantically wiggle the sticks.
There's one move in particular in this fight in which it really felt like classic RoboChallenge, in which you get the forks in and then you lift Shrederator up as you're driving towards the screws. And I thought, man, I've missed it so much.
It's really interesting actually how just that bit of transfer of weight all onto those front wheels gives us some really good power. As soon as the robots, and I think it was the issue with Blacksmith, that when we bit them, we tried to stay away from the front because they had the forks and dug in, and it really dug that back corner of their machine into the paint. And on the old floor, that paint was really thick. And I think that's one of the big things that sort of really made it difficult for us to slam people around. Whereas this time, if you get it right and you can just lift them off the floor, then you have some really good traction then to slam them around. All I wish is that those rotators on the wall spun about 2-3 times quicker.
It's one of those things as well. When you bite hold of the opponent and you let go to get the front wheels down, as Grant said, to give us as much traction as possible. But it's quite nice when you've let go and you slam them and you hit the wall and the both robots kind of separate and then you come back together again. It always feels a bit more dramatic when that happens. So it gives Grant a bit more control when you kind of put those front wheels back on the floor. But obviously, if they're hanging off the teeth, that gives us even more grip to zoom around.
Yeah, it's just a ballast. It's just a 250-pound ballast off the front of your robot.
And like you say, it was the first time it started to look like Spectre and the way that Spectre performed. And like, actually, this is quite cool again now.
Yeah, that's always cool.
Absolutely. One big concern we did have going into this fight, though, is that they've obviously changed the rules for this season on pinning and biting as well. And one thing that I'm not overly keen on is at the moment, if you hold them for, I can't remember the exact rule, for a certain period of time, you have to let go and then you have to back up a full floor square. And we were really quite concerned about that. But we went probably a bit more than we needed to on this one, sort of try and get a feel for that, see how it would affect us going forward. Unfortunately, it didn't have too much of an issue in this fight because horizontal spinners do take that bit longer to get up speed, and even just find out which direction they're pointing. So it wasn't too bad for us, but that rule change has been sort of quite a concern for us for this competition.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of last year's corralling rule alongside the update to, I think it's gone from 30-second grapples to 20 this season. So, yeah.
We're the only grappling robot left now.
I was going to say,
other than Overhaul.
Just you guys. It's a targeted
we don't need penalising.
One thing
I completely understand it. You want the most interesting, exciting fights the whole way. But as we've seen with the shelf, I think a lot of it is these rule changes and these ideas for the arena. I think the thought process from the get-go is right, and I like what BattleBots are trying to do, trying to keep changing things slightly to do it. I just don't necessarily think the outcome of them is necessarily the outcome that they planned for them. I think is the big thing. But I've got I'm pleased that they are trying to come up with new ideas and new rules and new things with the arena to try and spice things up a little. Just hopefully they find one that does make a big enough difference for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's nice to see some changes.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I will say about Captain Shrederator, which I did find quite interesting, is obviously they tried to do the same thing that Gigabyte did last year with a kind of fork arrangement at the front, which I kind of looked at and I thought, do you know what? Clever, because you've obviously put the big wedge on to try and deflect those big hits, and if they could disrupt that somehow, that's it's obviously going to work for them. But obviously, just didn't get the chance to. They kind of spun up and hit the wall, and one mistake was all you needed, and that was that.
Yeah, well, they had Captain Shrederator covered up just right until they walked through the tunnel, and we were sure they had something up their sleeve. And when we saw that, we were like, "Oh no, that's going to make things really difficult for us." But you'll see the very first charge at them that we made. We weren't actually going for the box rush. We were trying to sort of just go to the side and get them to change direction. As soon as they change direction, we know they won't be able to turn back on us quick enough. So we actually made sure that we missed them by enough that they had to turn and we could get around the opposite side. Otherwise, going head on or trying to go slightly side on was too much of a risk for us, which is why we sort of didn't go for the box rush, although it looks that way. It was purposely trying to not touch them at the start.
4D chess being played.
I was surprised. Shrederator last year had a setup where they could have bits on the top that span as well. Or was it a few years ago? I can't remember. Yeah. But they used something like that to try and stop. I think it was hammers. I think it was
Shatter.
Against Blacksmith or Shatter. In which they had that piece on, and I'd have thought that would have been quite a interesting setup against something like a Quantum. Who
we were sure that that's what they were going to do and why they covered it up. But I don't know why they didn't go that route. I'm not sure. We're not.
I don't think that would really work so well against us. Maybe hammers and things, because your first point of contact would be with the hammer arm. But for us, the first point of contact's with our front, and so if they did have that, we'd just keep the head up out the way so it didn't get hit. Unless it was like a great big bar that was up and out the way. But then, I think
if we bite down on the top anyway, our teeth are gone if it's up to full speed anyway. So, but personally, I probably would have run them if I was Captain Shred. But I'm not really sure why they didn't. It's one of those machines that if we let it get up to speed, we'd have been in trouble.
The strange thing is, when we've seen it at King of Bots, and it's absolutely lethal. It's devastating out there. It cleaves things apart. I felt sorry for there was an ex-robot there, and he'd armoured up all around the sides and everything. He was a beginner in the sport, and he said, as long as he doesn't attack me from the top, I'm fine. And somehow Captain Shred got catapulted off the floor flipper or something, and it landed on top of his robot and just
blew it
apart. Oh, poor chap. But out in China, it's absolutely lethal. So we knew that, it doesn't matter what people say about its reliability or whatever. We knew it was a good bot when it worked. So you can't you can't give it any chance.
But that's the thing. Although its reliability hasn't shown to be great the last few years, King of Bots and BattleBots, but when it does go, it is savage. And I think that's the same for almost every single machine in the competition now, especially now the numbers have reduced from 60 down to 50.
Yeah.
You're getting a really high level of machines in this competition now. And so it's very easy to dismiss something on the basis of saying, oh, it's not worked that well in its last fight or last series or anything. But all you need is for it to get up to speed once, and it can destroy you. So I know a lot of people seem to think that Crushers aren't the most exciting fights because there is a lot of pinning. But that's how we need to win a fight, unfortunately.
They're wrong.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But that's why we never go up to like the 30 seconds or the 20 seconds that you're allowed to go up to, because we don't want people to watch it and go, oh, that was boring. We want people to be excited by what we do. Like, we're not in it to just win it. It's more important that we're driving at speed and we're showing what the machine can do, rather than doing the competitive thing of grabbing hold of them, don't let go until we have to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll talk about your upcoming matches a little bit later on.
Yep.
In the meantime...
Yep. And Shrederator has to go fight Hijinks after this, so hopefully they do better.
Well, they did well against Tombstone last year. There's no reason why they can't do the same thing to
This is
to
true.
Hijinks. So watch out for Shrederator later on in the season. It'll be interesting to see how they recover. Fight number 3 was Ripperoni versus Gruff.
Pete.
All right, Pizza.
All right, Pizza. So I think there was a post posted today by the Ripperoni team where they kind of said why they kind of started so well. The control was excellent at the start. They kind of did that amazing little sciencey segment where they strip away all the armor and they show why they do. You know, they got like big bulge on the back, and it was a really interesting little bit. And I hope BattleBots do more of that.
Yeah.
But the reason why they were controlling so well at the start is because that little kind of bulge here, the silver kind of disc at the back, was running properly. It was, the flywheel inside was running. It was acting as a sort of counterweight, if you like, to the front end, the big spinner at the front. However, were running forks on the front instead of this wedge that you could see here. The leading fork got bent. Yeah. As a result, they had turned off the second flywheel, and the gyroing was maddening. And you can see why they have to have that second flywheel, because it looked uncontrollable.
Yeah, I think he does a good job of driving when that little flywheel is off, and they turned it off to conserve power for the big spinner because they knew they were going to have to self-right a lot with it. Yeah. So yeah, it made sense, but oh my god.
The Beyblade spin across the arena was
great.
Exceptional. Like the little breakdance across the arena
But
was wonderful.
It's the hit in which they just bounce off the floor under just physics and go flying, and it's that hit that damages the floor for the rest of the season. There is a Ripperoni hole in the arena now.
I think it's great seeing somebody going, okay, let's make a vert, but how do we use some innovation to take it to a level where other people aren't at yet? Mm-hmm. So it's awesome seeing it, and I think you need that first fight when you test that concept for the first time to go, okay, we're nearly there, we just need to do this little tweak, and it looks like a savage machine, to be fair.
Yeah. I've already seen several smaller weight class robots start to implement a counter-rotating flywheel in their spinner systems, and I think to lead the path of potentially the next evolution of a vertical spinner is really quite interesting. Like we potentially are seeing history with this robot, and it's a pizza.
It's a pizza.
And that's
it's
amazing.
so much smaller than just running a load of magnets in the floor as well.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
100%.
There's definitely some, cons to running a lot of magnets, because it's, I mean, if your whole design relies on, sticking yourself to the floor, and the floor doesn't stay, level all the time. And also if the magnets themselves have to be, somewhat exposed to be able to, work magnetically, because there is paint on the floor. It's not just bare metal. You got to find a different way to stay, gyrally stable if you're a vert. It's a complicated engineering problem, and this is a very unique solution to that.
Yep, absolutely. I do want to give Gruff a lot of credit as well, because they seemed way more on it than they were last season. Like, they had a really slow start last year, and I feel like picked it up a bit later on, but it didn't really kind of, it wasn't the Gruff that you kind of know and love, where, like, they're right at you straight away, they're in your face, and they're kind of taking those hits. It was full bore from the word go, really.
They seem to not care about their robot. They just drive it into stuff.
Yep.
And it's great to see, because it brings that character to their machine, that they don't give you that chance, that they don't care about the robot. They will just run it into your disk to stop it.
Yeah.
And that makes them formidable.
Yeah, it's very similar to how Duck would run. Just break your fist with my face kind of mentality, where no matter what the bot looks like afterwards, if I won, I did my job. But man, oh man, there's so many moments in this fight where you just see Ripperoni bouncing around, and then Gruff is just there running its fire and just, basically parrying. And there's a great hit into the shelf where it lifts it and almost gets it up top, but not quite. It hits like the stanchion in the middle. That would have been a great move if it had actually thrown it up on the shelf. But the carry across the arena was almost just as good.
Yeah, absolutely.
It had vibes of Whiplash versus Black Dragon last season.
Very much so. Yep, where it gets lick on the scruff and then just takes it. Super good.
You won't find many people using a weapon like a lifter constantly into a disc as well. I know there's one thing of constantly ramming them and trying to break their disc on your very well armored machine, but those forks aren't the strongest of forks, and they just plow them right in. And that's really good to see that they don't hold back.
Even after those forks break, they still seem to be effective. They've managed to find a way of keeping them in place enough to still be able to lift effectively, and they almost become like floppy wedgelets at that point, in which they can just lift up your opponent wherever and get under everything. I also thought it was really cool seeing Gruff's flamethrowers working for 3 minutes, like on and off, obviously, but I don't think we've ever seen Gruff using their fuel effectively for 3 minutes for their flamethrowers, so that was cool.
And I gotta say, I think
sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It was something where we were watching this match closely, because obviously we knew that Gruff was going to be our next fight, so it was very intriguing going, man, that thing's reliable, they're relentless, the flames don't switch off, the weapon just seems to keep working. Like, it's going to be an interesting fight.
A tough customer. There's instances near the end of this fight where Gruff is either peeling out or smoking, or one of the two.
Didn't look healthy at the end, did it?
They weren't moving.
No. And then the pizza was on fire too, and the last maybe 15 seconds of this fight, this is the pre-functionality test. We're still working, kind of, all of us. It's okay. But I think a very deserving judge's decision win for Gruff.
No, I agree. I think Ripperoni's problem was more, it kind of, until obviously the fork got bent, it was looking really good for Ripperoni. But after that point, it was just all control and all aggression went to Gruff, because Ripperoni couldn't control themselves, and they couldn't. As a result, they couldn't be aggressive because they had the weapon spinning. That's great, but they weren't using it in an aggressive manner. They just had it spinning because they knew it
was almost defensive at that point.
Correct.
You have to say hats off to Ripperoni. There's nowhere that you can safely run that machine to actually check that the system works, that the concept works. They could have put it in that first fight and it'd be a complete disaster. So for them to turn up with a machine like that's so unique, so innovative, with no testing, and to be able to put on a display like that, I thought really encouraging, really awesome.
I think they said it somewhere that they've spun up the flywheel on its own before, and they've spun up the weapon on its own before, obviously tied down and at a safe distance and everything. They've never had both systems running at the same time, because they didn't know what was going to happen, and they wanted to do it in the safest place possible, which is, of course, the BattleBots. So
I'm sure one of them told me they tested their flywheel, and because of the RPM that it goes, it failed at full speed. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe I'm getting confused, but I'm pretty sure they said that they tested it once and it didn't work. So it was awesome to see it working in that fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have a feeling as well, if I remember rightly, because we were obviously taking a close look at Gruff at this stage, that they were running quite a lot of magnetic downforce at the time, and that's why they were starting to have some issues with their drive system as well. But they've got quite an interesting drive system on Gruff, where they've got brushed motors and brushless combined in a single gearbox, so that they get that low down torque and startup, with then the extra power of the brushless sort of takes over at the higher speed. So yeah, that was very interesting to see.
Yeah, and I know you're sizing them up because they're up next for you.
Yeah.
So how'd you fancy your chance? With leading into that, how do you fancy your chances about like beating a bot like Gruff with your really strong weapon? But Gruff makes their own steel; it's their own alloy. So
yeah, well, we've seen them up against. You watch them up against Tombstone and things, and it's just a tank. It's a sandwich-shaped tank, but it's a tank. They had a couple of chassis of one of a thicker, more solid chassis than the other. There's not really anywhere we could see on it that you think if we go for there, we'll pierce through. And like you say, they had their
cleverly
own
designed as well, isn't it? Where like vulnerable bits are underneath those flame sections there, or close to them. So you've almost got like extra layers of armor and components above them. So it was a really interesting one where you're like, this is going to last a long time. This fight is, and they don't seem to die. And there's this kind of pressure that I never really like, where people come up to you and go, "Oh, Gruff, you're going to win that one." You're like, that's
it's easy said than done,
not
right?
necessarily.
It's never a sure thing.
No.
I like the confidence. But
we were going into the Gruff fight really saying that we're expecting a 3-minute fight, and we need to do everything we can to show that we've been on top of them the whole fight, because it's so well armored. It's quick, it's powerful with the magnets drive as well. We were thinking that if we go and bite onto it at all, trying to just push it, it'll basically be stuck to the floor with all those magnets in as well. And then with their new lifter being so quick, and they'll just fire it all the time. If they had that half up, just underneath our jaw or something and lift us up, we're going to be up and over all the time. So for us, it was a case of let's make sure that we just put on the best performance we can and try and win it on a judge's decision over 3 minutes. So that's sort of the mentality that we went into that fight with.
We also had obviously it's not come up yet, but we were thinking, well, if we were fighting Quantum with that, we'd modify those forks, and they did, and it was like So that was it, So
we lined. We sent Rob and Henry out to get some fireproof materials as well, so everything inside we wrapped up properly. Because again,
full of cookie silicon plates that you bake cookies on.
Yeah, so there you go.
Wrapped everything in there.
Nice. That's so good.
It's one of those things that for us, there's never a robot we go against and we think this is going to be a win for us or an easy win. There's so many things on every single machine that you think that could quite easily beat us doing this. And so you just have to look at everything. I'm sure most people go into the fights thinking the same. But
it's the grounded approach. Every bot has a chance to win every fight. I mean, we've said that multiple times here on this podcast, for the fact that there's very few robots that don't have a chance of going on a run given the right schedule.
It's not it should come up because I mean.
For us, I'd rather go in against Tombstone than I would against Gruff, I think, in terms of saying which one have we got a better chance of getting a win in. We've got more chance of taking a lot more damage from Tombstone, but I think under the right circumstances, we've got a better chance of beating something like Tombstone than we have something like Gruff that's well-driven and relentless and most likely go the 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And you can never truly predict how a fight's going to go. I mean, it's ironic we were having that conversation when we saw the fight here with Ripperoni, that who could predict what that thing was going to do next? No. I mean, I don't think even the drivers quite knew what it was going to do next.
Chaos theory.
Yeah. Fair play to Fred for keeping it kind of vaguely pointed in the right direction.
I enjoyed him running
that was really
to carry on driving.
Yeah, who knew that you could just run around the box?
Whoa.
You don't have to stay in your box technically. But to each their own.
Absolutely.
He looked like he was having fun. He was having fun with his mustache and making sure that it was looking good on camera.
Absolutely. Fight number 4.
Yep.
Halfway through.
Also, Ripperoni.
Go on.
Ripperoni is getting thrown the book at them. This is their perfect fight.
Endgame as well, right? Nice easy one after Gruff, right?
You know the phrase "out of the frying pan into the fire." Well,
literally,
they've just had the fire, and now they get more fire.
Scary. Well,
So-
we'll see.
Well,
We will see.
one thing I do like about Ripperoni though is the small details, like on the front of the robot. They've obviously got all the ingredients on there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Toppings.
Their opponent's name written on.
Yeah, the
the
next
small
customer.
details do make a
Gruff.
difference.
And it was like, I think the locking bar as well was like a
It's
knife.
bread.
It was a bread knife, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's just bread.
Oh, it was
That's
just
just
bread. Okay.
Yeah. It was a loaf of bread.
Class. Absolute class.
Silly.
Right, now to fight number 4, which, I'll be honest, I'm the biggest Shatter fanboy here. It is, honestly, it's a gorgeous piece of work. You know, everything inside is spectacular. You know, it always looks the part with all the geometric shaping on it. This is not a good matchup at all for Shatter. It is just, what can they do?
I loved the pre-match interview with Adam saying, yeah, he thinks it's going to go 3 minutes, and yeah, I reckon we stand a chance. And then you watch the pre-fight on their YouTube channel. It's like, this is not good for us. I hate it. It's awful.
It's, like, what can Shatter do? Like, they went for the Mary Special hammer that they used against Blacksmith last year, kind of maybe snipe a belt or two,
Yeah.
which they did manage to do. They sniped 1 weapon belt. The only problem is Huge has 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Huge this year is just unbelievable, isn't it?
Look how well. Do you see how well it moves?
It's
It's such a departure from when
it was
you
so
first
cumbersome.
seen it. It
in
was so
2018, right?
slippery.
2018 with no grip.
It's like it
and
was
then
on
now.
ice.
Yeah.
Now it's.
I think they've made so many upgrades to it. It's the worlds apart, the two robots. The rear standoffs have been bulked up because they flexed a lot last series and the series before, so they're really strong now. And yeah, they went with the Tegris wheels, which they've been testing out, and they work well. And the new S blade, which is, I mean, they've worked on the drive last season, and now they've worked on the weapon being, oh my god, just awful to face. It's, ladies and gentlemen, this is huge. Like, you could reintroduce this robot as a brand new this year because it is finally living up to potential.
It's you know they do so well in the smaller weight classes. You know they as we mentioned, we did our preview last week. You know they won the 12-pound class in normal Havoc. You know that concept has got so much potential, but we've never really seen it exploited to its fullest. You know we've seen it have flashes of greatness, but it hasn't. This was brutal. Like Shatter, like getting the tops ripped off, and the billet was starting to get cut up, and all the bits were coming out, and the hammer stops, and
it looked in a similar shape against Riptide last season, I would say, to how it looked at the end of this fight. I mean, it was completely done in, and massive kudos.
It's Adam's. It's such a great team. We've been around with the world with them competing, and you always get to see it, and they always get underestimated. And somehow they beat spinners. They beat all these robots where you go, geez, how did you manage that? Like, you got omni-wheel drive, which is a nightmare. If it was on a marble floor, then you can imagine that would be great, but you're dealing with potholes and all sorts of stuff. And yet they managed to do it. And to turn up with a robot like that each year, hats off to the guys. It's really good team, really well engineered. How they fight something like Huge and last for the period that they did is really big hats off to Adam and the team.
Yeah, and they do get this really they do get this really good drive into the shelf, and yes, that is going to be peeled up for the rest of the event. That one spot on the shelf, I don't think they ever actually cut that spot. That little corner, it's just peeled up there. So another way to track when fights happened.
But no, it was a solid drive. We spoke to Adam as part of our set of interviews at the event. You'll get to see that, I think, this coming Friday is when that one comes out. And he talks about some of the upgrades and things. But he said it's faster, it's stronger, more pushing power now as well, because they've altered the position of the magnets underneath so that they're getting more downforce. It's great. And as you said, Sam, earlier, they do get the hits in. They managed to snipe a weapon belt. They managed to take off one of those self-righting poles. They got Huge up onto their side. That could have been curtains for Huge.
Imagine that win. That would have been unbelievable to think about, wouldn't it? But it just didn't quite happen for them.
But Huge is such an evil robot.
Yeah, it's savage. And when you're fighting something like Huge, especially when you've got a robot like Shatter that is different to the rest of the field, it must be so disheartening to go in and just have that much damage taken and think you got to try and pick yourself up for the next fight and think that was just a one-off and sort of put that behind us. But losing with that much damage and everything that they did, I mean, it was a great achievement for them. But at the same time, it's like we came out of our first fight thinking, you know what, we're doing really well. This is performing as we want it. It's doing everything we wanted and gives you the confidence. But when you take a loss like that in the first round, it's very difficult to get your bearings back and make sure you come back in full form next time.
I was going to say as well, like, is obviously you're not dissimilar to Shatter in a sense that like you have a weapon which is kind of like you have to be directly in front of you and you have to kind of go arc down. It's huge, like a nightmare draw for you guys as well. Like if ever you got, I was going to say, it's just like it can hit all
Absolutely.
the nice bits on top and everything. It's just
we've got 3 mil titanium on top. It would just slice through without looking at it, unless we made some major mods. And I still don't.
It's one of those things where it's a difficult one because in the final of Gigabyte 1, our opponents started making all these attachments to take us on, and it's the mind games start then, and we start thinking, well, do we start making like a lifter attachment that goes onto the front of the head? And we started producing one in
full
titanium
razor style.
Well, we're trying to think of how do we take on this? They're putting this anti-Spectre thing on. How do you counter their counter? But then Henry quite rightly said, look, what we've done so far has steamrolled everybody. They're doing it because they're worried.
Yeah.
Don't change your game plan because we're good at what we do. If we start trying to use the head as a lifter, we're going to completely mess things up. We've never done it before. We're not rehearsed at it. It's not what the robot does. So you got to think when you fight something like huge, well, how do we make something so we're not just cannon fodder? 'Cause we don't just want to put it in there to get destroyed. But how do we make something that complements the robots? Let's not completely change our strategy. Let's not add a lifter on there or something like that. Let's think about how do we use quantum in the way that quantum should be used, but enables us to fight a robot like this.
And we don't know.
I don't know what the answer is.
Something to think about over the next few months, maybe.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Fight 5, which was Riptide versus Glitch.
If you wanted one that wasn't really a fight.
Yeah. I was going to say, it was 2 hits.
One and done.
Yeah. Well, you say one and done. It was 2 hits, and one of them was a little cheeky hit at the end. I wasn't. Not sure
one and done followed by one.
Yeah.
Yeah. This
that,
was.
That didn't go down too well in the pits. Then.
I'm not surprised. Like when I was watching it, like the only thing I'd say is at the moment, from my perspective, watching it on TV, you don't really know how much time there is between the first hit when they're turned over and then the follow up.
No, you saw it. Yeah,
but I was going to say, like, you can. I can only imagine. Well, Jeff, and obviously, all 4 of you were there, so I'm sure you can tell me how long it was. But
yeah, I mean, there's a big thing in the hobby, especially when you get to the level of BattleBots, where everyone's got a good mutual respect for everyone. They realise the work that's gone into these machines, and that you do absolutely everything you need to do to get the job done.
And no more.
And unless you're fighting them in the next round in an hour's time, you sort of if they're
we were just talking about Razor. What is this gentleman's agreement we're speaking of here?
I mean, it's one of those things.
We've been on the end of it, haven't we, Grant? With Lockjaw, when the robot was dead, we've lost. It's a bitter pill to swallow, and then to see them getting up to full speed, like, what's happening here? And then they cleave into the side of the robots. We suffered more damage in that than we did in the fight. And like, it's difficult to swallow it at the time. It's very difficult. It does take a day or two to kind of come round. And Donald came up to us afterwards, and he did apologise after a little while. I think he knew that that's not how the sport works.
And he's been around long enough to know that. So
so hats off to him. There's no and we would never do that to somebody, like if they're stuck or if they're dead or something. You just can't bring yourself to do that,
which we have done previously. Yes. But I mean, this was such an obvious late
handicap for later. Because so I was actually speaking to a few people over the weekend, and basically my understanding is that this weapon bar on glitch took a big hit, and obviously there's a big chunk of it missing afterwards.
Yes.
The only saving grace that I have, it's not an excuse for the late hit, because I think I agree with you guys. I think it was kind of fairly obvious, and it didn't really sit right with me. But like, the only thing I can kind of give him a pass for, Ethan, is there is a wheel moving on glitch.
Yes.
That's the only thing I can kind of be like, okay, so maybe he thought they might start up again and give him one more, but like it was dead. Come on now. the robot
sometimes you have to go to these dark places and make a mistake.
Yeah.
And as long as you put your hands up and go, actually, in the cold light of date afterwards, I got that wrong. Then people aren't going to laugh at you for it. We all make mistakes. There's always things where you go, oh, we should have done that, or maybe that wasn't the right call, and hopefully that's the case here. Hats off to him. It's a really savage machine. That single hit kill glitch, that's the level that we're at now with spinners, is they are capable of that. And you either build your robot to take that impact and carry on, or you do something else that ensures that you don't get that hit in the first place. With glitch, they've gone for a really cool omni wheel design. It can strafe, which is amazing, but it gives you that ability to strafe, but it takes away some of the other ability for control.
Yeah.
When you take some of that away, you're then getting into the realms of, we're going to get hit by a spinner now. And I just think that, we're at a level where you can't accept hits now from spinners. You have to try and avoid them.
I do like glitch's shape, but I do think it's very wide, and it leaves a lot of surface area where the weapon's not pointing to leave open to get hit. We saw Riptide got that corner, basically. I was disappointed they didn't go weapon to weapon, but I know that the weapon on Riptide is kind of one of a kind thing and very expensive to manufacture, and I don't know if they had a replacement for it. So, it's...
a lot of this comes down as well to things like Riptide reminds me very much of Death Roll, where you stick the weapon so far out the front to make the robot quite narrow that you can just charge at people without too much worry as well. You've got a very good chance of hitting them first, and you haven't got much spare surface area for them to get you. And that's what Death Roll doesn't need to play the ground game, because they've stuck the weapon out so far in front. Again, you lose some control on it, but it gives you advantages in other areas. Riptide, I think, is in a very similar level on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this fight was over very, very soon. One hit, all the encoders break, everything just blows up, and the poor glitch, once again, I don't know what we have to do to get this robot ready before its fight long in advance. It's so stressful. I can't imagine what that was like, because it looked like when they were testing it, it was late. The night it was late, and they were just trying to get it, in and ready, and it was ready to go. And then Kyle says to Ethan, "Go weapon on weapon." Like, dude, you just got this bot together. You're just gonna lose it immediately. But yeah, there was like a probably almost 15, probably almost close to 20-second lull of just glitch upside down, and then Riptide just punts him.
I don't know whether they were told to engage or something, but
it's possible. But I don't know. I don't know. I'll leave it at that. But anyway,
I think you have to give people the benefit of the doubt and hope that it was just a mistake, and that's
absolutely.
Yeah, but I don't really know, seeing that fight back, what glitch could have done. They could have tried to outdrive it or anything. I don't think they had the maneuverability or anything extra that they could have done. I don't think there was any other outcome really to this fight, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a tough matchup for Glitch, certainly. Which you'd expect for a robot that did so well last season.
Yeah, definitely.
Because we look back on all of our fights, and anytime we lose, you watch them back and you think, if I'd have just done this or I've just done that, it could have turned the whole fight around.
But in this case,
looking at this one, I don't.
What you do?
But you learn so much more from those losses. It opens up so many questions get answered through those. When you go in there, you give them one hit and you win. there's very little that you can learn from that fight other than
I
you
think
got
it's
the win. But
the big difference between this fight and the Ripperoni fight is why they kept their weapon going, because they wanted the data on the robot. They wanted to know what would happen if, and so they kept it going, and
See what happens, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, and future fights. Oh, I blew it. So the hugest next fight, going back to our previous batch, huge fights Blip next, which could be curious because I don't know if Blip can reach them. And then you have the ultimate hammer fight of all time, between Beta and Shatter, and that's going to be beautiful.
I'm excited.
Riptide gets to fight Mad Catter, which is
potentially interesting.
The story writes itself.
It does.
And then you have Glitch going up against, I believe it's Lockjaw. And then
we've been
that
at
should
the
be
sport for 3 years. We don't know all the backstories of things.
Oh yeah.
We'll tell you after the recording. How about that?
But I will say, Mad Catter, we know it from Gigabyte,
Of course.
and there was always something where, they always did an awesome job, but it never quite reached its potential. Seeing it this year, you go, geez, Mason, they've taken a step up there. I really wouldn't want
grown
to
up.
fight it now.
Yeah.
As has the team.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Fortunately,
They're
everyone
really
has.
solid.
Yeah. Joe, I thought you were going to say, Joe, there's just something about that Martin guy. I was just waiting for that.
I really like Martin. We
I
spent
2-3
weeks stuck in a small room with him, and we got from Megabyte at the last film. So,
There you go.
we get on well.
Good.
He's really nice chap. A good team player as well, and they've been in the sport a long time. They know what they're doing. But when I saw their machine this year, I was like, oh, that's taken a few steps forward.
Oh, yeah.
We've definitely been away a few years.
It is okay. We don't hold it against you.
Absolutely not. No.
We did sign up and enter every series of BattleBots. We just
Yeah.
had to pull out from COVID.
Good intentions.
Unfortunately, we were one of the only realistic teams that, when we were coming up to weeks before, thinking this isn't going to happen, and so instead of taking a load of time off work to build the machine, we thought, let's put tools down. There's no way we'll go, and fortunately saved ourselves a lot of time and money in the process.
Probably a sensible thing to do, for sure. Our penultimate fight for this week is free shipping and Gigabyte. Obviously, you mentioned you've obviously spent a lot of time with the Megabyte team out in China as well. This, to me, screamed of inexperienced driving and not having tested. Well, I don't know how much they would have practiced. Obviously, Gigabyte is such a demon of chaotic energy. Where do you test that? I know John Maladnik has done some testing on his driveway before.
Yeah,
I
at very
have
low
to
speeds.
say, if you were going to have a fight with new people driving who had never driven a BattleBot before, this is the fight that you'd put the robot in. But it's such a beast, Gigabyte, that if it's at speed and you touch the wall, it becomes very, very difficult for the driver.
It's chaotic for sure.
Yeah. And you say it's a good fight for them, but I mean, they're going up against one of the storied drivers of the sport, and actually, it really is a Robo Games fight. With the difference being that free shipping now has weapon. But yeah, this is a tricky fight even for a new driver anyway against somebody like Arigin. But hey,
yeah,
and it's like you said, there's nowhere to practice with these things. It's so dangerous that, like, it's like expecting a new person to get into an F1 car and set some kind of blistering lap. It's just it's really difficult.
Outside of playing the sort of third-party robot combat video games, there's no real simulator for this sort of thing.
No.
And let's be real, the physics aren't the same as feeling it in your hands.
It's unfortunate because I like the idea that they've gone with color coding the pole so you can kind of see where you're going. Okay, it's not perfect. I know Jevon, if you're colorblind,
doesn't help the colorblind.
Did not notice it was 2 colors for the first week of filming.
But you kind of mentioned as well, Steve. Gary is such an experienced hand at this point.
That's original sin. Like
it is.
You
really
can't
is.
argue.
Yeah.
That is original sin with a spinner, and that's dangerous.
Yeah,
with fire.
It's dangerous to be put in the arena with. So this was a fun match, though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I gotta
yeah.
say, I was quite impressed with the pre-test driving with Gigabyte. So I was curious to see how that was going to translate to the fight. But once they got spinning, it's very hard to drive that robot. I imagine it pulls, with that disc spinning. It's a whole different beast.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
the thing is, John's got many years of experience with Gigabyte,
Mhm.
and he was getting it to a point where the reliability, the drive, and everything was starting to actually get very good. And he moved from the E-Tex to the LEMs fairly recently, and they've been doing really well and performing well. But obviously, this time around, he's got a whole new team that have never used or driven this type of robot. And they've made a number of changes, so they've massively increased the speed of the drive. And that, I think, is one of the biggest mistakes they've made, because going full speed on the drive or even moving very quickly while you try to spin up with this, it just doesn't work. That's where you start getting bobbing around.
This thing, they pushed it to full speed, I think, right in the starting square. And then right immediately, the bot is facing backwards. And that's already disorienting. And then from that point on, Gary is all over them. Does not give them a chance to breathe. Gigabyte just keeps slamming into the walls. It has no idea where it's going. And that was kind of a shame, because I was excited to see this robot again. But once again, it's very hard to move in an arena. I mean, a third
of it is blocked off, right?
I can say that, yeah, because it seems like they spent a lot of time over by the driver's bays early on in this fight, and then they get chucked into the corner, and then from there it's just a clinic by Gary, and then the pole comes off, and then we Beyblade, and I mean, because the rest is history at that point.
Yeah, but it's a classic thing, I'd say. If you need to massively decrease the speed of the drive on that, just go back to sort of bite force speeds or less, and just make sure you've got some control. Because in the heat of the battle, you start jamming the sticks around.
Oh yeah.
On a robot like Gigabyte, you've got no chance of getting up to speed. And unfortunately, this was like a big lack of experience and understanding of this type of machine from the new team. And I'm sure that'll come in time.
Yeah,
But
I'm sure. Well, this is the fight you need. Sometimes you need a fight like this to be like, okay, that's what not to do. Going forward, this is the way forward. So it's a learning experience, and that's
The
sometimes
first
you just
time
need
of
that.
driving it, you got to hats off to them. They kept in the fight for a little while, and you don't learn until you jump in with both feet and give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
it's when when it's upside down, all the sparks start coming out. You think maybe it's time to turn it off.
Maybe you turn it down a little bit.
it was weird, because I was watching this with a group of people, and like when they're like, why didn't they just turn it off and then like let the whole inertia of the robot kind of like give it a chance to see what happens? Turn it off first and then see. But again, that's another experience that you don't know until you try it once, and then it doesn't
Spin
work.
it up to full and pull. Just play Beyblade in the arena. It's fine. It's all good.
Maybe not. Steve, future matchups. Who have you got?
Oh yeah, future matchups. All right, so we got coming up for Mr. Gary Jin and free shipping. His fight is going to be against the Brazilian Bull and Minotaur. Good luck.
Robo Games matchup.
It is another Robo Games matchup, isn't it? It's like Toro Maximus and Original Sin. I wonder if that's a theme for this year for his schedule. And then you have Gigabyte going up against Bloodsport, which should be a tasty matchup. Fire v Fire. I really like to see this new Bloodsport. We'll see the new Bloodsport coming up. I think it's episode 3. Yeah. So we'll get to see what kind of power they're packing, and then from there, we'll see if they have a chance against Gigabyte.
Let them rip.
Let them rip. Well, main event. We finally made it. Now, obviously, Grant and James, you obviously have been to China with the Tantrum team, and obviously you would have seen them in season 4. How much of a kind of stark difference was there between obviously what they had then and what they have now? Because like obviously we've seen Tantrum go on to be a top 4 finisher and obviously now a champion of BattleBots.
This is a far cry from boxing champion.
Does it surprise you? Like, was it kind of like ever that inclination of, okay, they're going to get somewhere with this, or is it kind of like, oh my god, like what a leap forward sort of thing?
I think it was interesting because it's back in King of Bots, it was a good robot. It was a brand new one. They come up with a new concept, a really interesting concept. It's something that I'd thought about before, of having like a hood over a spinner, so you could then hide it, get it up to speed, and then bring like a foil back and get the opponent with it. So they've done that in like a unique way of bringing it back. And given that it was a brand new robot back at the time, I thought it was a really neat machine. Their philosophy, I think, is more about the drive and being able to take those impacts from people. And that's 100% what you have to do if you want to be a champion in this sport. You can't have the biggest weapon, you can't have the best armor, you have to have the best drive. That's what this sport's all about. So I think they've obviously made leaps and strides. Their team, Aaron in particular, is very good at learning, is very good at improving his designs, really good engineer, probably one of the best in BattleBots, I'd say. Really, really top team these guys are.
If you take the performance of the actual robot out of the equation, he's made a massive leap in actual driving. Aaron spent huge amounts of time just practicing with this thing, gone through so many sets of wheels on it, testing at home. And that's shown massively in the last 2-3 series of BattleBots, that significant improvements in drive. And like I say, that's not just the physical changes and improvements of the robot, it's his skill level has massively increased through this. Unfortunately, this matchup is one where your drive isn't necessarily the key thing.
Well, when you go up against like another incredible driver in Daniel, Daniel Freitas, just on fire, like literally, like from the word go, kind of had a little bit of a shaky start. Tantrum did get that kind of nice glancing hit on the side where it turned it over, but as soon as Minotaur got that one big hit on the self-righter, that was pretty much curtains. As soon as you kind of see the self-righting poles fall apart, you're like, okay, one more hit and it's probably going to be done.
Yeah.
I think guys are they're a top team, and they've been practicing driving Minotaur for years and years. It's a really honed in design. They've got the same team working on it, the same person driving it. You expect a level of performance with that, and they always seem to deliver. And that counts for so much in this sport. Having somebody who's driving it day in, day out, every tournament, and you can see when it starts to gyro, he's able to counter it in ways that other people just don't.
Before it even touches down upside down, he's already caught it and it's gyroing back over. It's so impressive.
Absolutely. But I think one of the big downfalls for Tantrum on this one, again, is drive speed. He's as quick as it's ever been, with magnets holding it down now. And you can see quite clearly that it just loses that pinpoint accuracy. And although he's very good at driving and he hits the targets all the time, every hit, they then go at opposite ends of the arena and then come back at each other. And it gives Minotaur time to level up with them, and they're always going head on. And if you're going head to head with Minotaur, there's very little chance you're going to win. It's an incredible machine with a lot of energy. And so I personally think if their drive was a bit slower and more controlled than this one, and Minotaur never got more than a few feet away, I think that could have swayed the whole direction of this fight. But as soon as you get 10, 20 foot away from them in the arena, all you can do is full speed head on. And that's a lot of what this fight was.
Yeah, this was going to be very tricky for Dylan, for sure. Absolutely. I think even with all his driving experience in the previous season, it was still going to be a tough task to outdrive Minotaur in this fight. And it comes down to controllability and speed, and that's that we've touched on that actually a lot in this podcast, where that's really a huge key. Jevin, you were saying?
Yeah, the attachment they had on the front, I think. I've
Nice
been umming
idea.
and ahhing about it. Yeah, it's a decent idea, and I think it could have worked. Obviously, had it not got twanged up, because as soon as that happens, even slightly, Minotaur's got the advantage and can hit it pretty much anywhere. So it's a shame. I would have liked to have seen this fight if Tantrum had have run the forks. I want to know what would have happened. I know
I don't think it makes a difference,
drums
because
tend to beat forks.
I was going to say, because we saw what happened last year with Endgame. Minotaur just broke them all.
Yeah.
It would just do the same thing here, I think.
Or even just flat-faced it. I don't know. But yeah, it was a tough one. Tantrum got one or two hits in. I mean, they managed to start to turn them. And then there's another hit with the weapon you see in the slow-mo replay that they just hit the drum. And that's what tips it. But obviously, as we said, Daniel can catch that sort of thing now and come straight back in and on the aggressive. I enjoyed them trying to continue to move, and communication between the driver and the self-righter
Yeah.
operators, and he's saying, right, lift the tree mech and I'll wiggle the thing.
Oh, we got the
And we'll see
disc.
if we can shuffle around.
It's a nice idea.
Just good luck, but I mean, at that point, it was. It was over. Once the self-rider gets hit, and after that, I mean, Tantrum is still mobile. It's just, it's not got its wheels on the ground, and that's kind of key.
Yeah.
But after that, it's it's all Daniel and all the way. Really, really solid win. I mean, this is a bot you want to win against.
As well, right?
I think, when's the last time that a returning champion lost their first fight?
Not happened so far.
So there you go. That's a
not
strange
since
record to
season
set.
5 of BattleBots back in the classic series.
The classics, yeah.
It was quite cool seeing the Tantrum kind of
the banner.
Yeah,
that's a very sports-like thing, you know.
Do you want
where
to
you
know
like
a
have...
little tidbit about it?
Go on.
Sure. Oh yeah,
yeah. The first time they tried to unveil it, it got stuck.
Yep.
So they had to carry on with the reaction as everything, but they refilmed the banner unveil itself.
Okay.
Because it got stuck.
Oh, that's a shame.
Eventually, they got it down.
It felt so very Tantrum.
Of course.
It was the little banner unveil that could.
Yes.
And it's great to see a team like those guys, that they always come up with innovation. Blip is a masterpiece as well. The attention to detail to get them to run in that fine, narrow window of performance is really down to a lot of hard work from the team. So although this won't be an ideal matchup, and I think they've got a crazy difficult schedule, which doesn't give you much time to breathe or to get your feeling into it. It's always going to be a really tough robot to beat, and it's one of those where you could run this match 10 times and get a completely different fight every time.
That's a good point. Yeah, because really, I mean, given a different day or a different blow of the wind, who knows how this fight ends up. It could just be that Minotaur gets broadsided, even though with their thick armor package and the fact that like a lot of their bot is very centrally located, a lot of their electronics are very much compact, and a lot of the stuff you can hit is just metal. So that would have been curious to see if they were able to get to them, much like how Witch Doctor got to them last season toward the end. Speaking of matches coming up and possible controversy, and talk about it later,
both
Tantrum's
of these robots.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, so obviously we know Minotaur's next fight is free shipping. Tantrum
you do know that.
is Hydra, I believe, right? Is the
Yeah.
second fight?
Yeah.
Maybe we can hear some more lovely comments from Facebook groups and whatever, but I hope it's just a nice fight and they finally get to see
That was our hope going in, because when we heard about this, we thought, I think I know what they're doing, but I don't like it.
We found out on day one that this rematch was going to happen, and we were like, "Oh, come on!"
Yeah.
This
is lazy writing.
Yeah, we'd just been told that Witch Doctor was to fight Minotaur again, and it was just like, just leave it.
Don't need to reopen the old wounds.
We want the results that we wanted. Different results. Nah, I don't know. I'm just kidding, obviously. But hey, it's a prove it. Let's see if it was a fluke, and if it wasn't, then. Cool.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it was if you can even class it as that, because as we just said about this fight, you could run it 10 times, it'd be different results every time. Of course. So let's just do it for the next 10 seasons and see what happens. Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Such fine margins where we look at our losses and you go, if we just did that, it would have all gone differently. But then you go,
really?
that has to be the same for the wins
Of
as
course,
well.
yeah. This went right because we did this differently instead of like what we would have done before, sort of thing.
Yeah. And as expected, Tantrum's whole schedule is hell.
Yeah,
so
it's
good luck
terrible.
to them.
Yeah, Tantrum have Whiplash later. I can't remember their third.
Endgame again, isn't it?
Oh,
that was Blip, isn't it?
Blip.
That's it.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Team
family.
v Team that almost happened but didn't.
Yeah. Looking forward to that. Well, obviously, we've kind of discussed everyone else's schedules coming up, and obviously
Yes.
we've discussed a lot of things in this episode. I am conscious we've gone on a very long time, and thank you for anyone who's still listening and watching, and obviously thank you to Grant and James as well. Last thing to kind of discuss is your schedule.
Yeah.
Obviously, we talked a lot about Gruff. Black Dragon and Emulsifier are your other two fights.
Big verts. As you said, the field is full of them.
What was your kind
we
of
knew
reaction?
that we were going to be fighting them sooner rather than later. Obviously, starting off with Shred, I would have rather started off with Gruff because you just have that mindset of going, at least the robot's not going to be written off after. And that's always, whether you win or lose, at least we'll have a robot. Whereas after the verts, you're always in that camp, and the full body spinners are going, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what our last fight is. If we don't have a robot after Black Dragon, then it doesn't really matter. So I actually didn't want to know what our matches were. They were telling everybody what the matches were, and I said I didn't really want to know. I just want to keep focused on it, because if we start thinking too far ahead and start thinking about, okay, how do we take on Black Dragon, we'll miss basics about how to take on Gruff or how to take on Shred.
The classic phrase of your greatest opponent is the next one.
Yeah, and not anybody in the future. You gotta just take steps.
Yeah.
And I think
echoes of Jameson go in my ear. Just keep next fight up, next man up.
Exactly.
Yeah, I actively didn't look at fights from any of our next components unless it was the one we were just about to fight, and then you do all the research and all the looking into that one machine you can, and just concentrate on that. And when that's out of the way, then start looking at the next.
I think when you're looking at Gruff, we've already spoken about Gruff. So Black Dragon is obviously veterans of the sport. They've been going a long time, proven runner. If I'm right, they've never been knocked out.
Mm-hmm.
So you're always like, oh, that's our. If I've got my producer's hat on, that's our like A-star fights that we need to win. That they think's going to kill us off. But then when I knew that Adam Wrigley made Emulsify, I was like, that's not just going to be a newbie. That's actually going to be, for me, that one's going to be the one that. Well, they're both verts.
Yeah.
The thing was, we don't really know, or didn't know until we found out we were against the Multifier, what the pedigree of his smaller weight versions of that are. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, as soon as they said we got a Multifier, were saying, "Barry, you best start watching some videos of their smaller weight class versions," because
which you don't want to do.
Don't do that. Just live in ignorance. It'd be much easier.
Yeah. But no, as always with Black Dragon, we sort of went into it thinking it's a machine that we can, if we can get around, and I mean that thing drives very quickly and very sort of very well. That as long as we don't the plan is sort of just don't go head on, because we can't necessarily win the ground game at the moment, to try and outdrive them and see how they react from that. Because a lot of fights lately are people shooting over to the other side of the arenas and then going head on. We thought if our whole thing is try and stay close, and we try the same thing with Gruff, with these guys, with the Multifier, with Captain Shred, and try and not give them a second to even think. And that's how we go into all of these fights. And we say, like, where do we need to stay away from to give us the best chance? And ideally, where's the weakest points we can crush? So on Gruff, there wasn't really many places that we thought it's not solid. So for that, it was just anywhere we can grab. We'll try and get onto. With Black Dragon, we knew that sort of on either the front sides, I think one had the gas tank under one side and one had the batteries under the other.
I think they removed some stuff, didn't they, from the front?
What's that, sorry?
Those pods in the front had stuff in, and they removed one lot of them, thinking that we might bite through. I think they put extra armor on top, and they removed something. I can't remember what it was. Something that they thought was vulnerable.
Yeah.
I mean, you get to the point where people go, "Oh, what's your strategy for this match?" And you go, "Same as everything."
The robot hasn't changed.
Yeah.
The thing is, we're very open. We're very open for not having loads of configurations. We have the robot open on the bench. We put in our vertical spinner or normal wedge on the front with our sort of low wedgelets on, or we've got our big horizontal one so that we can drive better, and not get caught up on the floor. And that's what we go in with. So we're not worried about all these mind games or which configuration are we going to put on for this or that. We know that well in advance. So all we start thinking of is, how do we outdrive these guys? Where do we need to stay away from? and where are the juicy bits, and and start working on it from there. And that was the same for all four of our matchups, really. There's no sort of major change in strategy, because I think as soon as you start really mixing that up, like James said before, you then start doing things that you wouldn't normally do, and that's where you can start catching yourself out. But no, we were quite concerned for two reasons, knowing our matchups all the way through. Is that one, we knew the field's full of vertical spinners. We're going to get some savage ones, and there's two very savage ones there. So we knew we had a lot of chance for getting destroyed. And secondly, the other big concern for us is as soon as someone knows they're fighting an axe or a crusher, it immediately gives them a lot of time to start armoring up. And these guys then had multiple days to start thinking about what they could do, go out and get new things made to go on top if they needed to. And that starts playing on your mind. And it's sort of a bit disheartening, really, when you think we can't necessarily come up with something to just immediately
There's no like
damage us.
Anti-spinner thing.
Yeah, but it's very easy for an opponent to come up with a way for us not to be able to crush through them at all. And yes, there's weight implications and things. They might have to remove a wedgelet or some other bits to do it, but they can completely negate the piercing of our weapon very easily. And so that sort of, I really like the idea. And again, I don't like keep bringing King of Bots up all the time, because
no, please do.
We do.
Let's talk about Robot Wars.
Yeah. Well, we couldn't compete in Robot Wars, so we can't do too much of a competition.
This is true.
However,
and if you did, that would be a very naughty of you.
Exactly. But from King of Bots, what I really enjoyed, there were some great bits and there were some terrible bits about King of Bots. Yeah. Terrible bits, producers not really knowing what they were doing half the time, and you didn't know what you were doing. But the really good bit about it was, certainly like the last ones, you didn't know who you were fighting until literally 5 minutes before.
Yeah.
Your robot was there. You had, all of a sudden the match would come up, but it wasn't just a standard match. You could be a 1v1, you could be 2v2, you could be 4-way, it could be...
Who knew what the format of King of Bots was?
Yeah, you didn't know what the format was, and you didn't know who you were going in against at all, literally until 5 minutes before the fight. And that for me was really exciting, because there was no planning. People can't make things to go against you. It was what's on your bench. If you can't change it out in 5 minutes, you go in as you are. And that for me was really exciting. And the more planning and everything else you add into the mix of knowing your fights many days before, for me personally, takes a lot of that sort of excitement and things away. You get too stuck into the nitty gritty of how are we going to do this and how are we going to fight that. And a lot of teams love that. I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. I
think it helps the verts again. If you've got like Beta with a hammer or Shatter with an axe, to create a polycarbonate armor when you know you've got like a few days notice, that's really achievable. There isn't something that you can put on your robot that goes, okay, we're fighting a vert, so we'll put this on and then that stops that. It's a really interesting dynamic of the sport. And we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, but again, it's the difference between a lot of people love to do all that planning and modify the machine to give them the absolute best chance you can. I very much like that spontaneous thing of, you've done all your design and your build before you get to the competition. Now fight with that one machine, your one setup. You don't have 5 different types of wedges or multiple configurations. You go in with what you've designed and you work it out when you're in the arena. And that's what I like. I'm not saying that's best for the sport or that's the best way to go forward. But I'd be very interested to see what would happen if BattleBots literally got you up to the arena and then you found out who you fought there.
Kind of like a curtain raises and your opponent's in front of you, like, that's who we've got.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that would
be an interesting idea for a different robot combat show.
Yes, we've always said that we're better decision makers back in the workshop as well. So we can think about huge now, and we can think about engineering solutions that might work for it, and we can come up with the concept. When you're there, sometimes you put something on your robot, you're like, what on earth did I do that for? That's not going to work. You're kind of clutching at straws, really. So I think it's definitely, don't come up with new tactics when you're at BattleBots, because in the heat of the moment, with no practice, no knowledge of it, you can really go down a blind path quite quickly. So we're very conscious of, okay, let's not just stick a lifter on the front of the robot quick because we're against a vert and we can get under them and do this, that, and the other. It's very much, we know quantum, we know what it does in theory. Let's have some faith that we can perform.
Sort of maximise the package that you've already got, sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
I
mean,
try not to become a jack of all trades but master of none.
Yeah. We're a master of one trade.
Chewing down on your opponents,
and you do it very well.
You do indeed.
The difficulty is getting them in the teeth in the first place. Once they're in the teeth, it's probably the only robot where you can go. Right. Now,
all right, cool.
Take a few seconds. Yeah.
Say that, but now one of the big things playing on our mind with Emulsifier was that it's all well and good biting onto it somewhere, but once we've got it, it's a very different dynamic actually to fighting something like Black Dragon. Dragon we can bite, and that disc is going to be up to speed, but we feel like there's more area to try and get around it, and it needs to give a good solid hit on you because that weapon's that much smaller. Like I was saying earlier about Riptide and Death Roll, Emulsifier is very similar. That disc doesn't look anywhere near as big on that picture as it is in real life. And then you think, as soon as that weapon starts to spin, there's so much energy in that. It doesn't need to get to full speed to tear a massive hole in you. And so that's probably the only fight that we actively thought, if we get them, we can't just do what we want with them. We really need to make sure that disc doesn't get up to speed at any point. So our sort of thought process going into the Emulsifier fight was a very different one to what we've had previously. Although the tactics and the way we go about it all the same, it was a case of, if we get a chance to bite it, we can't hold on to it and just move it around the arena because that weapon will be up to speed. And with those tank tracks and big magnets holding it to the floor, it's also very maneuverable. So one lick of that disc and we're in trouble.
Yeah, we saw it in its fights beforehand, and you go, "Oh man, that's not a novice robot. that's a evil machine."
We're interested to see how you fare coming up in the later in the series. But that is that. We are finally done. Grant and James, thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting talking to you both, and good luck with the rest of the season.
Thank you very much for having us. It's great to chat with you guys. It was nice to meet you out at BattleBots, and next time you guys are in the UK, let's catch up at the workshop.
Sounds like a plan. Because I'd say we're fairly local. Well, I'm fairly local.
You're fairly local.
I'm very local.
I'm the opposite.
You can come to the workshop then, Sam.
All right,
and just send them a postcard.
Absolutely, sounds
that's
good.
The one.
Yeah, well,
I'll come on a small iPad or something.
They did for me at BattleBots, so it's only fair that I have to return the favour. Right?
There you go.
With that said, I have been 764.
I've been Steve the American Killjoy.
I've been World of Woodrow.
And we've been Team Quantum.
And this has been the RoboCast.
That'll do it. We'll see you next week for the second episode review, but until then, be good and take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.